Hello, and welcome to the first episode of our Dfend podcast here on our lovely new home of Dscribe. It's very nice in here. My name is Brodie Cowburn. I'm your host for today. Today we're going to be talking about the A-League Grand Final. Being Grand Final week, it is super exciting. In a week where Barcelona won the league, the team donning blue and red that made all the headlines was a team based out of Newey. What a week it's been. Stunning Scorpions and obscene own goals. It's been a roller coaster of football emotions that had no break and just kept going and going and going. And joining me for this lovely chat this afternoon is my good friend. Amazing, exquisite, beautiful, unbelievable, and unexpected. One of the most extraordinary things I've ever seen. Oh, sorry, I just got caught thinking about Riley McGree's goal again. Here is my co-host, the adequate Matthew Evans.
Thank you, Brodie. Thank you for having me. And I must say, it is the ultimate compliment to be compared to a Scorpion, arguably the greatest.
There was no comparison. I just got lost in my own head.
But that goal, no other goal will top that in the A-League. Ever.
It is probably the best goal in A-League history. We'll have a little chat about that because first off what we're going to talk about is being Grand Final week. We need to analyse the two teams that have made it to the big dance.
Yes.
And of course they made it to the big dance by winning last week in the semi-finals. We'll start off with the game out of Newcastle. Newcastle Jets versus Melbourne City.
Yeah, and it was a very good game and it was very important for the Newcastle Jets. It was the first time they had played a final in 8 years, and there was a lot of build-up, and it was a really nice story because, after years of, ending the Tinkler era to then going on to, manager after manager to finally putting together a squad under Ernie Merrick. And it's almost a fairy tale in its own little way, and it's really brought about the community. There was one game that I watched, and I reckon it was one of the best games of the season, and it sort of typified where Newcastle was heading, and, they were about to get onto success was when they played Sydney FC at Newcastle, and it was the packed crowd, 20,000 fans there, and they were getting behind this team, and they won that game, and I reckon the momentum has carried on into the finals. It's
been a shining light for the season, really, the Newcastle Jets. They've been a breath of fresh air that I think everyone needed in a season where things have been pretty stagnant, and there's been plenty of complaints about the way that the league has been run by the FFA and all those sorts of things. So I think that the fact that the Newcastle Jets have been so fantastic this season has been wonderful. It's really given something, really given everyone something to get behind. And the Newcastle community especially have embraced it. They turned out in droves throughout the season. And again, they had a crowd of 20,000 for the game against Melbourne City on the weekend.
Absolutely,
and there really was a game that typified everything that Newcastle's been about this season. It's been fast, it's been attacking, it's been entertaining. The turnaround that club has had under Ernie Merrick is astonishing. This is a team that finished last season. They finished on the bottom of the table. They were coming off a dreadful period under the ownership of Nathan Tinkler, in which the club was almost dead and buried at a certain point. The FFA had to intervene and pretty much overthrow everything.
Exactly.
The fact that they've been able to turn it around and find themselves hosting a grand final for the first time is astonishing, and there's a statistic that teams turning around the last place finish into a grand final appearance is very, very rare in the top leagues across the A-League, the AFL, the NRL. It's only happened a couple of times. And Newcastle Jets, not only do they go into a grand final after finishing last, they come into a grand final as favourites.
Exactly.
And almost you'd think deservedly so after the game that they played against Melbourne City.
And it would be a nice fairy tale like we've touched on before. And yeah, you'd go back to some of the actual football they played this year, attacking, the people they brought in, also the sort of the balance between defence and attack. And I think one of those, it's typified by two key signings, Torpor Stanley and Daniel Georgievski. And I'm a big fan of Daniel Georgievski. Obviously, he was a former Melbourne Victory player, was part of their key success. And I think that one of the things that Newcastle got really right is that they thought, well, if we're going to challenge for success, this is who we've got to recruit. And their recruiting has been, it has been the best, and it could literally win them a championship.
Now, if you think about the players that got them to this stage, you've had new guys such as Dimitri Petratos, Andrew Naboo hasn't been at the club long, was so successful that he's now gone on to Japan.
Exactly. Both of whom called up into Merrick's squad and in World Cup calculations because of their form at Newcastle.
Absolutely. You think that Naboo's almost a surefire starter with the lack of options that Australia have down the flanks. So,
exactly.
really, it's been stunning. And we'll talk a little bit about this game at Melbourne City. A crowd of 19,131 ended up coming, which for the Newcastle Jets, given their past seasons, is quite fantastic. Everyone really getting behind the club. Melbourne City took an early lead through Bruno Fornaroli. It was a weekend of the scripts being turned over a little bit, and
it's
going a little bit topsy-turvy.
Because people were expecting, I was like, well, Newcastle were obviously going in as well. They were the favourites, and they were going up against this, cash in abundance football club in Melbourne City, and it's thought, well, as soon as Bruno Fornaroli scored in the 14th minute, you would have thought, oh, this is not going to look good. Is the fairy tale not going to happen? But then certain things started to happen. In fact, I reckon in the first half, Newcastle had all of the play. They were the most attacking. They were creating all the opportunities, and it was just a rebound from defence that they were able to make the most of it. And then Bruno Fornaroli capitalised on that. And then obviously into halftime, and then things started to change, and the momentum shifted. And then Newcastle just started doing the basics right.
There was some real defensive lapses in Melbourne City's performance, and they were the worst team on the day. Newcastle Jets easily bested them throughout midfield and throughout the entire pitch. But it says something about the quality of that side, Melbourne City, that is. Because I do think that on paper they are a very good team. That they nearly were able to beat Newcastle at home. Exactly. In the end, it was a terrible, terrible mistake from Malik, who failed to clear it out of defence that resulted in the winning goal from Jason Hoffman. But poor Jason Hoffman was a little bit overshadowed this weekend, wasn't he? Yeah,
well, because the goal preceding that is the goal that everyone's talking about. It's honestly, again, like we said before at the top of the show, I don't remember a goal better than that. When I was watching it live, I was out of my couch, and my old man was like, "Calm down, would you?" I was like, "You just don't understand."
He doesn't get it.
He just didn't understand. This is arguably the greatest goal ever, and it's up in for international. It made international news, and the reactions that people had to this goal were more than the A-League had gotten on most of any of the content they put out. So it's certainly a goal, but you can talk more about.
Well, it went across to the to BT Sport on Twitter, posted it. The official FIFA account, the actual governing body tweeted it out. Yeah. It was on the front page of Reddit. The Newcastle Jets video they put up got over 1 million views and was retweeted countless times. And it's really, the first time in a while that I can remember a goal from the little Hyundai A-League going big on such a global scale. And it's a little concerning almost that people are going to see that goal and have an idea that that's the standard for the league.
And we'll touch on it more about the two finals as a whole, because both of the finals were very entertaining. Everything was happening. So, and what that goal gives, like you essentially touched on, is that it gives the league so much exposure, and also the talent that's available in soccer. And I know you've written a piece for Dscribe about how a second tier would benefit these younger players. We'll be seeing more of these from our younger.
And Riley McGree's a young player as well. He's on loan from Club Rouge. He is just another one of those. There are lots of exciting talents in Australian football at the moment. Between Daniel Arzani, who was playing for Melbourne City,
and best young player of the year, I think.
Yes, won the best young player of the year at the awards. There are talented young players out there that'll hopefully take
Danny De Silva at Central Coast.
Absolutely.
As well.
Obviously, Central Coast Mariners, he was a little bit of a big fish in a small pond down there this season, but maybe next year under Mike Mulvey, he might get a better chance to play amongst better players, because he can provide all the service he wants. But
Newcastle's success, regardless if they don't win or if they win, it gives it sort of clubs like Central Coast. That's like, well, they're not too dissimilar to us. We're in we've been in similar situations.
Yeah, financially speaking, Newcastle aren't a big club, and they're still able to have found such success. Down to the people like Laura McKenna that they've brought in. It's a club of passion at the moment rather than a club of, cash.
Exactly.
Which is what you have with Melbourne City here, which I think is what made this clash especially so intriguing. It really is. Some people might call it a clash of passion and plastic.
Yeah, perhaps.
But it was good to see Newcastle get up and get a win. It's going to be an electric atmosphere at their home stadium when it comes to Saturday
I cannot wait. A good community feel at that ground.
McDonald Jones Stadium has been really the place to be this year.
Someone went really hard in the media about their stadium, their ground.
Well, of course, there are complaints about the number of seats
Yeah,
and the
seats,
capacity
yeah,
that it'll be
absolutely.
able to hold.
But
It
it's
is
an
worth
it's gonna be-
noting that there should be 30,000 people at the game, and that's about roughly the same attendance as the Melbourne Victory Sydney FC Grand Final from a couple of years ago. So,
But there'll be a great atmosphere nonetheless.
They've been making the front page of the Newcastle local papers. You know, there's just a real
Absolutely.
sense that everyone's getting behind them,
Yeah.
and really looking forward to seeing how they perform up against Melbourne Victory, the surprise team of the finals. If Newcastle Jets were the surprise packet of the regular season, then Melbourne Victory have certainly been the surprise packets of the finals, just
Absolutely.
really crawling their way over the finish line.
Well, they've done it where it matters. That's in the finals. Obviously, the two games that they played were very intense games, highly entertaining games. Both of them. Victory's journey to get to where they are is quite phenomenal. Phenomenal. That's a hard word to say.
It is really difficult.
Yeah,
I don't
but
blame you.
and even like we talk about the game against Sydney FC and. That game, we'll touch on it more, but the game itself had everything. It was a semi-final. It was a big blue. There were red cards. There were flying charts. There were own goals, and it was just utter chaos. But Victory, despite earlier in the year having even questioning whether Muscat should stay. I mean, we have to forget. We can't forget that
There are still people who will question that if Melbourne Victory win the grand final. It's hard to avoid.
exactly, and and all that uncertainty was in the first 10 rounds. And then when Victory started to win some games, and then, and then he got the contract extension. And then Victory had another spell. They were very inconsistent, Victory.
Yeah.
But they've managed to pull it together when it was just like when the Western Bulldogs. They got it together at the right time. And that's how finals works. That's why in the Premier League, if you're the most consistent team throughout the year, you get rewarded with the title. In the A-League, you just have to be the best team on the day when it comes to, in the finals. And Victory, on 2 occasions so far, have been the best team. Yeah,
The Victory coaching team has been wiped out before the grand final.
Yeah, that's a very little interesting. Do you reckon that will have much impact? I mean, they won't have a presence on game day.
I don't know. As far as assistant coaches on game day are good to bounce ideas off of, but I don't think if Victory lose that it's a worthwhile excuse.
No.
And if they wanted their assistant coaches there on game day, then maybe they shouldn't have rushed the field and put their hands on a player.
Yeah, well, see all the footage of that.
That should go without saying.
That's the footage of that. That was actually quite a confrontation.
Yeah.
I mean, surely you can celebrate and get in. No, you shouldn't get into people's faces, but they celebrated and carried on like morons.
It wasn't ugly. It was certainly ugly. An ugly incident.
We shouldn't let that detract from what will be a very good grand final.
And we shouldn't let it detract from what was a very good game. The story of the game, really, rather than the idiotic acts of the coaches, was the journey of Terry Antonis.
Oh, we were both watching the game, and I was on my phone messaging you, and there was a little period where it was quite tense in the last 10 minutes. Could Victory hold on? And then literally with 30 seconds to go, Terry Antonis, unfortunately, nets one into his own net, and we're into extra time, broke Victory hearts. And what impresses everybody is the ability to absorb that. He was almost in tears. You could see him at the end of regular time.
Especially when he's coming up against his old club in Sydney FC. There would have been so much emotion surrounding the occasion, and after putting one into your own goal in the 95th minute, I can't imagine what was going through his head. He would have wanted the ground to open up and swallow him whole.
Yeah, and to process that through 30 minutes, or for virtually for half an hour in extra time, and then for him to pull off. So he won the ball on halfway on the wing. To make that run,
I'm a little unclear as to how he beat those two players on the halfway line. It was
quite
a mess of feet. Sometimes football is beautiful and elegant, but sometimes you just have to smash your feet together.
But it was a real scrap because everyone had heavy legs, and that's what made that goal. It was as phenomenal. It's one of the best goals you'll ever see, and obviously you can't compare it to the Scorpion kick because that's a worldie in its own right. But
the Puskas Award winner.
Yeah. The actual effort that Terry Antonis, he actually willed himself, and then he had enough power to amass and put it in. And then, the rest of Allianz was quiet. Victory were going off their heads, and we were into another grand final. They're 6th, isn't it? Is it the sixth or?
No. Well, let's think. I'm going to say fifth. We had the two finals against Adelaide, which were 1-0 and 6-0. There was the final loss against Sydney FC.
The final win against...
And then the final win against Sydney FC. And then we'll have the Newcastle game.
Okay, right.
So that'll be 5.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But
so that'll be...
It should make for an excellent matchup. And we'll compare those two teams now.
Yeah.
The teams that have made it to the big dance, Melbourne Victory and the Newcastle Jets. We'll start off by having a look at the team sheet of the Melbourne Victory, shall we?
Yeah, so obviously working from the back, Lawrence Thomas, he was a very good player.
Lawrence Thomas is easily one of the best goalkeepers in the league. Jamie Young won the award for best goalkeeper, which is rightfully so. But
he made more than 10 saves in that semi-final, and including a really important double save. And realistically, the only times he were beaten were by his own players who scored the own goals. Sydney FC peppered him, but he made so many good saves. And he, like you say, he's been one of the best goalkeepers and is one of the best goalkeepers in the competition.
Absolutely. Really. Jamie Young won the Goalkeeper of the Year award, but that's mainly down to the fact that his defence was so old and shoddy that he was able to make more saves.
It'll be interesting to see.
He really essentially single-handedly kept Brisbane in finals contention. Lawrence Thomas, luckily, had a better team to work with, but he is easily one of the best goalkeepers in the competition and one of Melbourne Victory's best ever keepers. He's been so impressive. You know, he's been one player who's kind of come up. You know, he wasn't a big money signing or anything like that. He worked his way up from being second in line, and he's really earned his stripes.
Earned his stripes and waited his time.
Absolutely.
As well, and it's very important. And I
think very highly of Lawrence Thomas.
And he's going to be vitally important. And that's another thing worth mentioning. We can compare the goalkeepers. Jack Duncan, he injured his quad or hamstring. He's out.
Went off injured in the semi-final, which is a massive shame. But it'll see Glenn Moss. Glenn Moss is one of the most competent backup keepers.
Exactly, and you talk about Glenn Moss. He's been a journeyman, played for many of the A-League clubs, and you know it's a great story for him because you know he would have thought, if Newcastle he wouldn't have dreamt of being potentially a championship-winning goalkeeper. He was going to be sitting on the sidelines soaking it all up, but all of a sudden he's going to be playing.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
He's a former Melbourne Victory man as well. He's done the double. He's been at Gold Coast and Newcastle. He's done the Palmer Tinkler.
Oh, yes.
I don't think Tinkler was there when Glenn Moss was there. I don't know.
To be fair, I think he was at Wellington for much of it. But you know, the goalkeeping is going to be quite interesting. If we look at...
I wonder if there's many players that have done the Clive Palmer Tinkler double. Zenon Caravella, maybe? I feel like he might have been at both. That could be incorrect, though.
That's a good question. Maybe we'll leave that to the listeners and the viewers.
Let us know any better.
If you've got any spare change, Brodie, we might put it into a prize to see who can see who's done the Clive Palmer Nathan Tinkler double. Gee.
If Nathan Tinkler has any spare change, you can put it into a prize.
We're probably asking.
He's gone bankrupt.
Yeah, probably.
Oh. Yeah. Maybe not.
Touchy subject.
Is my net worth higher than Nathan Tinkler's right now?
Oh, well.
Would that make me a more qualified owner of the Newcastle Jets than as previously?
I don't know if he still owns Newcastle, the rugby team.
I have no idea. You're asking the wrong person for NRL, I'm afraid.
Yeah. I sort of loosely know because he used to own it. Anyway, the point is, let's just if you can figure that out, who've done the double, good on you. But back to what we were talking about with the teams and.
The rest of the Melbourne Victory lineup. I'll go through the defence. We've got Stefan Negro, Lee Broxham, James Donachie and Thomas Deng as the likely starters of the grand final. Obviously, the big name missing is Reece Williams. This is a really, really, really shoddily put together defence. It's made up of people who are playing out of position and young players. And
we made that critique. I remember around, almost a year ago, Brodie, we were having this conversation. You know, Lee Broxham as a potential left back, centre back for me, that's not his position. But you're right; he plays out of position. And
he's played at left back all year, and he's been serviceable. And it's one of his great strengths in that he's so flexible and can move all around the pitch. But if you have to break it down, speaking quite frankly, Lee Broxham and Stefan Negro are not championship-winning fullback.
Exactly,
they're not at that level.
And someone that you brought in to win a championship in Reece Williams, he's ruled himself out. He got an injury in the warm-up.
In the warm-up, yeah. Desperately unlucky. And Reece Williams is a player who's had injury problems and always seems to strike just before World Cups. Obviously, It would have been a tough squad to break into because you got lots of great options at centre-half for the Socceroos. But He's certainly had a great season for Melbourne Victory, and he's been injury-free throughout all of it, and it would have been a really great opportunity for him if he was able to push on, have a great game, and maybe get noticed by Bert Van Marwijk, but it looks like it's not to be, which is a massive shame because it always seems to happen to him. One of the most desperately unlucky players in Australian football, but hopefully...
Or in any sport, really. I mean, it's just simply devastating that you miss a grand final that you work so hard for throughout the entire season. A long season, a way too long season, but that's another story.
I was doing some reading because one of the common criticisms of the A-League is that the season is too long. And I do agree that it is hard when you have teams that are playing each other 3 times throughout the regular season and then finals, that it can be a little grating at times. And if we had, say, 14 teams in the competition or 16 and they could play each other twice, that'd be perfect. But apparently the reason is that for Asian Champions League qualifications, teams must have played a minimum of 27 games in the regular season.
Really?
Yeah. So there you go. That's a fun fact for you.
So expansion's going to be an interesting conversation how they work out. They'll work out the logistics.
Terry Antonis, Carvalari and James Troisi were the 3 players who lined up in midfield, and that'll probably be the same for the grand final. James Troisi scored a great goal to put Melbourne Victory back in the game, and the celebration that kind of was quite popular online with the covering of the years. Did you see that?
I saw that.
I'm not sure what the exact meaning behind that was. Someone will have to ask James.
Very interesting, that one.
But
it's very solemn as well. He shut his eyes.
And then up front, Costa Barbarouses, Besart Berisha and Leroy George. It'll be interesting to see Besart Berisha. He's had very contrasting games. In the first game against Adelaide, he was incredibly quiet, hardly affected the game before scoring.
Yeah, that was
at
a
the very
good goal.
end.
Talk about a good goal.
Yeah, I know, a little bicycle over the back. And then against Sydney, he didn't score. However, he was much more influential. He held the ball up. He brought his other players into the game. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of game we see from Besart Berisha on Saturday. He's going to have a lot to do because Melbourne Victory are going to need to be active up front.
Absolutely.
And given the fact that Newcastle are likely going to score. If you look at Newcastle's attack versus that defence, if Melbourne Victory keep a clean sheet, it'll be a miracle.
Yeah, absolutely. And another player we touch on in here, I think he came 3rd in the league, best and fairest. Leroy George, he's been phenomenal for Victory. They're going to try everything to try and keep him for next season, but he's been such a great player.
It would be one of the great shames if Melbourne Victory lost Leroy George, and it would really shine a light on the marquee system and its failings at the moment. If a player the quality of Leroy George who's come into the league is made to leave next season due to there not being enough cap room,
they need to get rid of that or work out a way that...
Well, I think that there just needs to be some work done. The fundamental idea of a salary cap to equalise clubs isn't so bad, but we could do a whole podcast on this, couldn't we?
Yeah, it's another story, as they say.
But
in the journalism world.
Hopefully Leroy George stays next season because he's been absolutely phenomenal.
So he's been great for the league.
He's been a great attacking presence for the Melbourne Victory. Let's quickly run through Newcastle Jets lineup. We'll likely have Glenn Moss in goals. In defence, we'll have Nikolai Topol-Stanley and Nigel Bogard as the centre halves with Daniel Georgievski and Johnny Kutrumbis, who was a new player who lined up at fullback for the Newcastle Jets. I'm, of course, a fan of the fullback Nick Cowburn, given that he's my namesake. I don't know if we're related. I don't know. I don't think so.
Bit of ancestry.com there.
I will have to do some Googling, but we may very well be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll wait and see who starts in that position.
Very good.
In the midfield, Ronald Vargas, who's been injured for most of the season. Stephen Ugargovic, who's been brilliant. And Riley McGree, who scored that worldly. And the big name missing is Ben Kantarovski. He's kind of a strong midfield presence for Newcastle, who's injured.
Just on Ronnie Vargas, I was watching that game and he did some really cynical things. And the commentators were saying, should he be playing? He's a high quality player, obviously. But he just looked a bit, frustrated. He's not quite. I don't think he's quite right. Is that fair?
I think that's a fair assumption. He's been pretty much rushed straight back into the starting lineup since his injury. And
should he start off from the bench, or should he? I
think for a grand final, he's the kind of player who has the quality to be able to change a game, just in terms of his ability. So I think that you have to start him because he could really just turn it on at any moment. And maybe you could argue for the semi-finals if he's making cynical fouls, maybe start him on the bench so he doesn't get red carded. But we've made it to the grand final. We've made it this far. You may as well start him.
Exactly.
Up front, we have Dimmy Petrados, Roy O'Donovan, and Jason Hoffman. Obviously, that's a lineup that has been weakened throughout the season by the loss of Andrew Naboot, who won the goal of the year on the weekend at the awards.
You would have thought that would have done some serious damage losing Andrew Naboot, but
Joel Hoffman stepped up and scored the winning goal.
Yeah,
this is a defender turned attacker who was able to lend a hand and be the winner for his team. Not that most people realised it. With the whole Riley McGree nonsense that was going on across social media.
Yeah.
But that is a very, very, very strong lineup, and that attacking lineup in particular is going to cause Victory some real headaches.
Yeah, and you talk about defending defenders under pressure and Victory's defence. Roy O'Donovan loves putting pressure, particularly if Melbourne Victory are playing at the back, which they do. All clubs do, but Victory like to do it and build from the back. And a player like him, a player with his experience, is going to provide such leadership that, like we've touched on many times, that the Victory defence is going to be tested and it's going to stand up. And, Lawrence Thomas and the Victory defence they've assembled are going to have to stand up to the task.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough.
It is going to be tough. We'll move on now to some predictions, maybe. We've evaluated both the clubs, and I'd like you to tell me who's going to win, who'll be the best on ground, and a talking point from the game that you can foresee happening.
Well, everyone loves the fairy tale. Western Bulldogs in the AFL, Cronulla Sharks in the NRL, Newcastle
North
Jets.
Queensland Fury returning to the A-League in 5 years. And
that would be a fairy tale in its own right. But I feel as though that Newcastle would be that fairy tale for the A-League. It's I think it's what the A-League needs. But that's beside the point. I think they'll win? I think they will. How the game will play out, it will be a very tense, frantic first 30 minutes. And then the first half will play out to sort of like, both sides manage to get on the gaining composure in the game. But then the second half is just going to explode. There's going to be goals after goals, and then who knows what happens. But I think Newcastle, if you look at the team sheets, what we've evaluated, I think Newcastle will win. It will be a high-scoring grand final. I reckon it will be a 3-2 Newcastle Jets victory. But I see you're a Victory man.
I'm wearing the scarf, but I must say that my allegiances, I would like to stay unbiased, and mostly I just wanted to keep my neck warm and to, make present an appearance. It is
for those who are listening and watching from interstate, we are in Melbourne, and we've managed to catch ourselves on one of the colder days.
Yeah, I'll come to the defence of my cold neck. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. I realised that. Sorry about that. Sorry for being insensitive.
Shall I tell you what I think is going to happen in the grand final?
I think that's what the listeners and viewers may know.
Look, for me personally, Newcastle Jets have been the best team throughout the whole season, apart from Sydney FC.
Exactly.
Who obviously really should be playing today. It's a massive failing of theirs that they weren't able to get past the Melbourne Victory, and it's a very, very, very disappointing way for Graham Arnold to end his tenure at the club. Newcastle have been fantastic all throughout the year, and I think their attacking firepower is just going to be far too strong for the Melbourne Victory. For my man of the match, I think that Riley McGree will take it out. He's been brilliant since coming to the Newcastle Jets. Not just because of the brilliant goal, but it's worth noting. I'm not on the bandwagon. I do want to say that in the previous week, in Newcastle Jets' last game of the season, he did score a hat-trick against Central Coast Mariners in an 8-2 victory.
I would say...
he hasn't been at the club very long, and every game he's impressed for me, so I think that he'll continue to do so. And I think that Victory are going to really struggle. I think they're going to be outclassed, and it'll be a bit of a wake-up call that they're good, but they're not as good as potentially they see they are. I think that it'll be a 3-0 victory for the Newcastle Jets. Yeah,
okay, fair enough. And just touching on I think Dimi Petratos, I think he's a very good player. I like him a lot. And it seems as though everyone's getting on board Newcastle. Yeah.
I'm jumping on the bandwagon.
We all are. As much as, for Victory fans, they want success. They're a club that, demands success. But, if they lose to Newcastle, there's no disgrace in it, given the context of our team.
Absolutely not.
The team. Sorry, I'm just...
I'm biased.
Sorry, I'm a proud Melburnian. Behaviour. I'm a proud Melburnian Victorian. But there would be no disgrace in losing to Newcastle Jets because they are the favourites, they are the team to beat, and they deserve to be.
Yeah, and all we can say at this point is that given the eyeballs that have been put on the league in the last week, with two fantastic games with great stories to be told, I just really hope that people tune in and watch the game, which will be on Channel 1 and Fox Sports.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really has all the makings to be a great game.
Absolutely.
So please, if anyone's on the fence, watch the game. Please watch the game.
And also, just touching on that, this grand final, it can turn out to it'd be really good if it could finish off a really good A-League final series, because this has been one of the better A-League final seasons I can remember. And that's going to the games where Melbourne Victory played Adelaide and when Melbourne City played Brisbane. They were 2 quality games as well. So this would just encapsulate a really good finals series.
Yeah, and it all goes down on Saturday nights. It's going to be super exciting. I personally can't wait. I won't be making the trip to Newcastle because tickets sold out in about 30 seconds.
Yeah. By the way, if you're looking for tickets, don't be fooled. There's ticket scalpers around, so make sure you don't fall for that trap.
And make sure you don't pay those ridiculous rates that are being charged by the members. That was They actually said that they're going to be banning any of the members that have decided to buy a heap of tickets and sell them on. So those Newcastle Jets fans are getting a backhand from their own club, and rightfully so.
Yeah, I agree.
But anyway, let's not end it on a negative note. Let's be positive. It's going to be a fantastic game.
It's going to be great.
I really can't wait. It's going to be awesome. And above anyone winning, I just hope it's a fantastic game, and it really has all the makings of it being.
Absolutely. Indeed.
Anyway,
fantastic.
Best of luck to both clubs. It should be fantastic. From myself, Brodie Cowburn, my good friend Matthew Evans, thank you so much for your time today and for listening and for watching. And I'm sure you'll see our faces pop up again on Dscribe sometime soon. Thank you all.
Thank you.